Hey folks, welcome back to another What's in There video where I take and show you something that comes in a package so that you can go and make a better, more informed decision on whether or not you're going to pick that up. Today, we're going to be looking at these little guys right here, the new Commander decks for Star Realms. The answer that Star Realms has given for the character decks for Hero Realms. So let's go ahead and get down to the table. I'll show you what comes in each and every one of these suckers. Now, the Unity Command deck contains Biolord Walsh. He starts with a hand of 6 cards. He starts with 70 authority, and he is a combination of the Blob and Machine factions. He has these two gambits down here in front of him. This one, the Unity Warcraft, is one that will always be available to him, and it will always be active, and it basically gives all of his bases +1 and all of his opponent's bases -1. Then he also has Walsh's Stratagem here, which is always available until he uses it. So this is a once per game type thing here, and it's going to basically give him 2 trade. Then it's also going to provide these 2 ally abilities for that current hand. Then it also says that you can put the next base you acquire directly into play. So that's a pretty cool thing. And then once you've lost it, once you've used it, you lose it. Now, you also have the Mechworm here, which actually is removed from the deck and put into the trade deck at the beginning of the game. So it's going to be a really nasty card for Biolord Walsh to have, but his opponent also has the ability to purchase it because it goes into the trade deck before the trade row is done. And then on top of that, it comes with a deck of cards that is specific for his own play. So this deck will not be the same as the person who he is playing against. And this is his starting deck. It starts with a Cluster Viper, which gives 2 combat, and if it allies with a blob, gives an additional 1. Then you also have the Laser Drone, and so you have a single and double ally abilities as well, so that's a possible 5 combat there. Then you also have a Protopod, which gives you 2 trade, and if you ally with a blob faction, then it gives you +1 combat. Then you also have a Ranger, which gives you either 2 combat or 1 trade. Pretty cool. Then you also have just some regular scouts like this, just like you would see in any of the regular starter sets, starting decks rather. Then you also have a Scout Bot, which gives you +1, just like the regular Scout does. But if you ally with a Machine Cult, you can choose a card of cost 2 or less in your discard pile and put it on the top of your deck. So that's pretty cool as well. You also have the Swarmlings, which give you 2 combat. If you ally with a blob, you also get an additional 1 and combat, and you can scrap a card in the trade row. And then you also have a Viper, which gives you just regular 1 combat. And then the Welder Drone gives you 2 trade or 2 combat, whichever you need. And this is Biolord Walsh's starting deck. So that's what comes in the Unity Command deck with Biolord Walsh. The Coalition Command deck is going to give you High Director Falcon, and she's going to have 62 authority and have a hand of 6 cards. She's also going to have these 2 combat cards, the Falcon's Enterprise, which says flip this gambit over and put it into play as one of your bases. So if you flip it over, it gives you the Coalition Stronghold, which will give you allies for both the Machine Cult and the Trade Federation. And it's going to give you 2 combat or be able to heal 2 authority, and it says if this base would leave play, scrap it instead. So it does have an outpost 6, so it's pretty fragile, I guess you could say, but it's also pretty helpful as well. Then you also have Coalition Efficiency, which this allows you to keep it in play throughout the entire game, and it says once per turn, if you would scrap a card in your hand or discard pile, you may choose to gain 5 instead. And if you look at the rules for this, it says that you can do this even if you would not be able to scrap a card from one of those two areas. You have this mech command ship that's going to be shuffled into the trade deck before the trade row is built. So again, it's going to be a card that's going to be very good for you, but it's possible that your opponent will be able to get a hold of it and not you. Then you also have a cargo boat that gives you 2 trade and heal 2 authority. You have a Federation Scout, which gives you 1 trade, and then it says if you have an ally, trade Federation ally, it says the next trade Federation card you acquire this turn costs 1 less. So that's a pretty cool thing. Then you also have the Frontier Tug, which gives you 2 trade, and then if you ally with a trade Federation, you shuffle the next base you acquire this turn into your deck. So that's cool. It doesn't have to go to the discard pile first. You also have laser drones here that have 2 combat, but a possibility of up to 5 if you can double ally with it. And then you also have a Ranger, which is 1 or 2, just like in the other decks that we've seen. Then you also have the Salvage Drone, which gives you 1 trade, or you can scrap a card in your hand or discard pile, so that's pretty neat. Then you have, of course, a number of scouts that will be part of your starting deck. And then you also have that Viper, and you have a Viper bot, which gives you 2 combat, and if you ally with a Machine Colt card, if you've scrapped a card from your hand or discard pile this turn, you gain an additional 3 combat. So that's a pretty neat starting deck for High Director Falcon. The alignment command deck comes with a Divine Admiral Lee, and he will start with 64 authority and have a hand of 6 cards. Of course, you get his authority counters here. He also starts with these 2 gambits in place in front of him. So this one is always available, the Alignment Ingenuity, and it says whenever you use the scrap ability of a ship or base, you may draw a card, then discard a card. And specifically, you would use the scrap ability of the card you're scrapping first, and then draw a card and discard a card. And then Lee's foray here, basically for that turn, you would use this and then scrap it, but you would be able to have the ally abilities of both Star Empire and Machine Colt. And then you may scrap a card from your hand or discard pile, and if you do, you draw a card. So these are cool gambits. This is a one and done. This one stays around the entire game. The mech battleship will get shuffled into the trade deck before the trade row is built, and so it will be available to either you or your opponent. Of course, probably better for you. And then the starting deck of Divine Admiral Lee is the Talon, the Imperial Talon, which gives you 2 combat, but if you ally with another trade Star Empire card, you get another additional 2 combat. Then you also have the Imperial Viper, which gives you 1 combat, but if you ally with a Star Empire, then you may discard a card, and if you do, you can draw a card. So that's good. You have the Ranger, which we've seen before, 1 trade or 2 combat. Then you also have the Salvage Drone, which is 1 trade, or you can scrap a card in your hand or discard pile. And then you have a number of scouts that are normal scouts from the regular starter decks, and then a scout bot, which gives you a 1 trade, or you can choose a card of cost 2 or less in your discard pile and put it on top of your deck. We saw that earlier as well. Then you have the Stellar Falcon, which gives you 2 combat, but if you ally with Star Empire, your target opponent has to discard a card. And you also have a regular old Viper in there for 1 combat. And then you have the Welder Drone, which gives you 2 trade or 2 combat, whichever you'd like. So that is everything that you get in the alignment command deck for Divine Admiral Lee. In the Alliance command deck, you're going to find Fleet Director Nandi and her scoring cards here as well. You'll also find both of her Gambits card. The Alliance Procurement is a card that will stay in front of her for the entirety of the game. It says once during each of your turns, you may gain 2 trade, or you can put the next ship or base you acquire on top of your deck. So that's a pretty cool ability to have for you. Then you also have Nandi's Onslaught, which you have to scrap it. It's a once use per game, and it gives you the ally abilities of both Star Empire and Trade Federation cards in your hand for that turn. You also get to draw 2 cards. Then you and each opponent discards a card. So that's pretty cool as well. The Super Freighter here will go into the trade deck before the trade row is built, and it will give you 4 trade and the ability to draw 2 cards. But if you ally with either the Star Empire or the Trade Federation, you get to draw a card, and that's an 8-cost ship. Then the rest of the starting deck for Fleet Director Nandi is going to be a cargo boat, which gives you 2 trade and can heal 2 authority. The Diplomatic Shuttle gives you 1 trade or healing of 5 authority. The Federation Scout gives you 1 trade. If you ally with a Trade Federation, the next Trade Federation card you acquire this turn costs 1 less. The Imperial Viper gives you a 1 combat, but then you can also discard a card if you do, you get to draw a card if you can ally with another Trade Star Empire card. These faction names are funny. Ranger, we've already seen that, either 1 trade or 2 combat. Then you also have a number of scouts here that we are familiar with already. And then you have the Stellar Falcon, which we've seen already before, for 2 combat, and if you ally target opponent, it discards a card. Then you also have the Tribute Transport, which gives you 2 trade, or you can draw a card, then discard a card. That's pretty interesting. And then you also have a regular old Viper in there as well. And that's what you're going to get in the Alliance Command deck with Fleet Director Nandi. In the Pact Command deck, you're going to find Overlord Newberg. He's going to start the game with 66 authority and have a hand of 6 cards. And of course, here are his scoring cards there. He also has the Pact Dominion, which is a guard that's going to stay on him the entire game. And basically it says each turn, the first time you would gain authority back, you also gain 3 combat. Now, so basically that just means if you're going to heal, he's going to give you +3 combat. So that's pretty cool. Then you also have Newberg's Game, which is going to, you're only going to be able to use it once. It's going to give you 3 combat and 4 authority back, but it also allows you to have that extra ally ability for both Blob and Trade Federation cards that are in your hand that time, and then you're also going to draw a card. So that's a pretty cool thing as well, but one-time use only. The Super Carrier is going to be added to the trade deck just before the trade row is built, and of course that means that you or your opponent will be able to get a hold of it. It says you may acquire a ship for free and put it into your hand. Whoa, that's pretty cool. And then if you ally with either Blob or Trade Federation, you can also draw a card. That's pretty nasty. You also have a Cluster Scout, which is going to give you 1 trade, and if you ally with Blob, gives you 1 combat, and you can discard a card in the trade row. You also have a Diplomatic Shuttle, which we've seen before, 1 trade or 5 health. And then you also have the Escort Viper, which gives you 1 combat, or if you ally, if you ally with a Trade Federation, you also get 1 trade. You have a Frontier Tug, which gives you 2 trade, and if you ally with Trade Federation, you get to shuffle the next base you acquire this turn into your deck. The Ranger, we've seen before, gives you 1 trade or 2 combat. Then you also have a Ripper, which we haven't seen before. It gives you 3 combat. That's pretty neat. Then you have a number of Scout cards here that we are very familiar with, and the Viper that is back there as well, and then the Swarmling, which we've also seen, gives you 2 combat, and if you ally with a Blob faction card, it gives you additional combat, and you can scrap a card in the trade row. So that's everything that comes in the Pact Command deck with Overlord Newberg. And finally, here is everything that's going to be coming in the Union Command deck with Hive Admiral McCready. McCready is going to start with 60 authority. He has a hand of 6 cards, and of course here are his scoring cards that he'll use. The Union Blitz is the card that he will always have available to him, and basically what it will do is it gives him an extra combat if he allies with either of these 2 factions. So if he's able to ally with both of them, he'll get a total of 2 combat, every round if he's able to ally with these two things here. McCready's Maneuver will give you 5 combat and then give you the ability to ally with both the Blob and the Star Empire factions, and then you also get to draw a card as well, but this is a one-time use thing during the course of the game. The Meganaut is going to be added to the trade deck before the trade row is built, and it's going to give him 7 combat, and you can draw a card. If you ally with either the Star Empire or the Blob faction cards, you're going to be able to draw another card, and you can also scrap it for another 6. So that is a huge card. Just keep in mind that your opponent will also have the ability to purchase it as well. The Cluster Viper, which we've seen before, gives you 2 combat, and if you ally with a Blob faction card, you get another combat. The Imperial Scout gives you 1 trade, but if you ally with a Star Empire card, it gives you 2 combat as well. The Imperial Talon gives you a possibility of 4 combat if you ally with a Star Empire card on that turn. The is that right? The Protopod, yes. That looked weird upside down. This is a 2 trade card, but if you ally with a Blob faction, you get a +1 combat as well. The Ranger we've seen before, 1 trade and 2 combat. The Ripper we've seen before too, which gives you 3 combat. That's pretty nasty. And then, of course, the Scouts that come in the game, and of course your regular Viper that comes in your starting deck as well. And then finally a Tribute Transport, which is going to give you 2 trade, or you can draw a card, then discard a card. And that is what comes in the Union Command deck with Hive Admiral McCready. So that's that for what you're going to get in each of the different command decks that are coming out for Star Realms. So you can pick and choose which ones you're going to get, or you can just go ahead and buy all 6 of them to enrich your play with Star Realms. I really like the fact that they have done this with Star Realms, because when they did it with Hero Realms, it kind of blew my mind. I loved the fact, I love variable player powers, I love being different than my opponents, and so when Hero Realms did that with the character decks, really loved it, and I'm so happy that they've decided to go ahead and go forward with doing this for Star Realms as well, because I really think that helps the diversity of the game just a little bit more. It can feel very vanilla if you and your opponent always start off the same, but having those differences and those different abilities with the Gambit cards really makes things very, very fun, and it spruces the game up a little bit as well. So hope you enjoyed this video and you found more information so you can make a more informed decision on whether or not you're going to purchase these guys. Thanks for joining me. I certainly appreciate it. We'll see you guys and gals on the flip side. Take care.